Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. I'm your host, Michael Clogs. And in this next segment, we're going to hear from the United Nations from their press center, and they're going to be talking about ongoing human rights needs and how they are actually managing to tackle them, and some updates on efforts that are ongoing. Some of the things that we do want you to know about and focus on is that the WHO has called for more global action to eliminate trans fats from our diet and to come up with healthier, non-toxic ways of feeding ourselves. Trans fats in a lot of cases can be traced back to a root cause for things like diabetes and heart disease, and the WHO is trying to get those eliminated from our diets and from our food systems. Also, another thing to focus on is that the children in the Ukraine have been, because of the war, have been disrupted from education. The war efforts, while they're ongoing, and that we have heard how Canada and the U.S. are sending armored vehicles and tanks. We've even heard some debate over whether Canada should send the Leopard tank, but as it turns out that if they aren't sending the Leopard tank, then the Abrams tank will be sent from the United States. So there's a lot of ongoing efforts in how to help Ukraine protect itself against from the invasion of the Russian Federation. But one of the things that we need to focus on while Russia has been attacking civilian sites is that for 11 months of war, the Ukraine education system has been disrupted. And what kind of effect does that actually have on the Ukrainian children? So, some of the things that we're going to hear about and the United Nations will be talking about. So, let's move ahead into the press conference segment.
Okay, good afternoon. The Secretary General left Cabo Verde a few hours ago after a 3-day visit at the invitation of Prime Minister José Ulises Correa e Silva. This morning, he attended the opening of the Ocean Summit, which took place in Mindelo on the island of São Vicente during a stopover of the ocean race. In his remarks, the Secretary General noted that in the face of climate change and plastic pollution, humanity has its own race to win, the race to protect our ocean for the future. He pointed out that the ocean supports the air we breathe, the food we consume, the cultures and identities that define us, the jobs and prosperity that sustain us. The ocean is life, he stressed. The Secretary General emphasized that ending the ocean emergency is a race we must win by working as one. It's a race we can win, he said. He called on all to rescue the Sustainable Development goals, including SDG 14, and become champions of the ocean needs. Before leaving Cabo Verde, the Secretary General had meetings with President Jose Maria Pereira Neves. On Saturday, on his first day in Cabo Verde, he met with the Prime Minister. In a press encounter after his meeting with the Prime Minister, the Secretary General noted that Cabo Verde is on the front lines of the existential crisis generated by climate change over the past 5 years. He's faced a severe drought. He said he is deeply frustrated that global leaders are not giving this life or death emergency the action and investments it requires. Following the visit last week by Amina Mohammed and a delegation of senior UN and NGO leaders to Afghanistan, there is Martin Griffiths, our humanitarian chief, is leading a delegation that also includes President and Chief Executive of Save the Children US, Janti Soerpto, and the Secretary General of CARE International, Sofia Chiniero, and the Deputy Executive Director of UNICEF, Omar Abdi. The visit comes 1 month since the de facto authorities banned Afghan women from working in national and international NGOs, putting some programs on hold and sowing fears that the already dire humanitarian situation in Afghanistan will get even worse. Some 28 million people in need in Afghanistan, 350% hike in just 5 years. That's according to the latest humanitarian needs overview for Afghanistan released just today. Members of the delegation will be briefing you upon their return in New York next week. More travel by senior UN officials. Rosemary DiCarlo, the Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, arrived in Baghdad yesterday on an official visit that will last through tomorrow. The visit will also take her to the Kurdistan region of Iraq. Yesterday, she held talks with Iraqi President Abdulatif Rashid, Prime Minister Mohammed al-Sudani, and the Foreign Minister Fuad Mohammed Hussein, as well as Speaker of Parliament Mohammed al-Habousi. She pledged the UN's continued support for Iraq's reform efforts, commended its constructive regional engagement, and stressed the vital importance of further advancing the role of women, youth in building a prosperous and stable Iraq. Today, Ms. DiCarlo has been in a meeting with representatives of Iraqi civil society, including women leaders and youth groups. She will then travel on to Erbil. The Undersecretary General for Peace Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, today began his travels to our 3 peacekeeping missions in the Middle East. He's currently in Camp Fouar, visiting the UN Disengagement Force, otherwise known as UNDOF. Over the course of the trip, he will also visit a number of UN positions within the area of separation and on the Israeli-occupied Golan, as well as meet with senior government officials in Damascus to discuss mandate implementation. On January 25th, Mr. Lacroix will arrive in Beirut, and on the 26th, he will meet with the caretaker Prime Minister, Najib Mikati, and the Speaker of Parliament, Nabi Berri, and other senior officials in Lebanon to discuss peacekeeping issues and matters related to the mandate of UNIFIL. He will then travel on to Naqoura on the 27th. From there, he will meet the UNIFIL leadership, as well as the personnel of the mission, and having some field visits along the Blue Line. And then Mr. Lacroix will visit the UN Truce and Supervision Organization, UNSO, which is headquartered in Jerusalem and is the first peacekeeping mission established in 1948, which is the reason why we're marking this year the 75th anniversary of UN peacekeeping. He will meet with senior Israeli civilians and military officials on the contribution of peacekeeping to regional security and stability as part of his stay in Jerusalem. And also on the 75th anniversary of peacekeeping, our colleagues in the Peacekeeping Department are launching a campaign to mark the occasion under the theme, Peace Begins With Me. The campaign promotes understanding of the challenges faced by communities in conflict, demonstrates the value and impact of peacekeeping, and calls for a collective global movement for peace. As you may be aware, as I just mentioned, in fact, the first peacekeeping deployment was in 1948 to supervise the implementation of the Israel-Arab Armistice Agreement. Since then, peacekeepers from 125 countries have served in 71 operations around the world. More than 4,100 peacekeepers have given their lives under the UN flag since in the last 75 years. The campaign provides an opportunity for us to remember their sacrifice and be inspired by their legacy. A couple of humanitarian updates from Africa. First, in West Africa, in Niger, the third high-level conference on Lake Chad region opened this morning in Niamey. The two-day event brings together the governments of the region, that's Niger, Nigeria, Chad, and Cameroon, as well as international donors and partners, multilateral and international organizations. Speaking at the opening, the Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Joyce Msuya, called for the coordination among humanitarian, development, peace, and stability efforts. She stressed that our commitment must be measured in decades and not years to build lasting resilience to the shocks we know are coming and the dramatic changes that are already causing so much hardship. And in South Sudan, the UN humanitarian coordinator ad interim, Peter van der Auwert, strongly condemned today a new attack on humanitarian workers and assets that took place in the east of South Sudan. On January 18th, several armed attackers broke into international NGO compound in Pibor, injuring one humanitarian worker. The attackers targeted the NGO looking for cash and other assets and stole valuables. This is the third attack this month after the killing of two aid workers in the Abyei administrative area and another one in Jonglei State. Our humanitarian partners tell us that vulnerable communities are indirectly affected by these attacks as they hamper the delivery of much-needed life-saving humanitarian goods. South Sudan is sadly one of the most dangerous places for aid workers, with 9 humanitarian workers killed in the line of duty and 450 incidents reported in 2022. Already, 3 of our humanitarian workers were killed this year. In 2023, 9.4 million of the most vulnerable people in South Sudan will need urgent assistance and protection. That's up from 8.9 last year. And in the Horn of Africa, in the Horn of Africa across Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia, an estimated 22 million people are now acutely food insecure because of the ongoing drought that we've been telling you about. According to our colleagues at WFP, some 5.1 million children across drought-affected areas of the 3 countries are acutely malnourished this year. The forthcoming March 2023 rains are also forecast to be below average. WFP warns that these rains failed and humanitarian assistance not to be delivered at scale. Food insecurity will continue to deteriorate. To address the devastating drought-induced hunger and malnutrition, WFP is pursuing an integrated dual-track approach, meeting immediate life-saving food and nutritional needs while simultaneously building resilience to extreme climate variability. Tomorrow, our guest here will be the Stefania Giannini, UNESCO's Assistant Director General for Education. She'll brief you on the International Day of Education with a focus about Afghan girls and access to education. We are delighted to welcome 2 more member states to this year's honor roll, thanks to Latvia and the Netherlands for their full payments to the regular budget. We're now at 7, and a reminder for member states who have their checkbooks out, if they want to make it to the honor roll, they have until February 16th to pay their dues in full, though we will accept payments after February 16th. Speaking of accepting payments, Edie.
Thank you, Steph. 2 follow-up questions. First, is the Secretary General doing any other travels in Africa since he's there and there are quite...
No. He'll be coming back. I think you can expect him to go to the annual AU meetings that take place in February, but we'll have a more detailed announcement then.
And secondly, Martin Griffiths' trip to Afghanistan, one would assume that going with a high-level delegation of NGOs, that their aim is to talk to the Taliban officials about getting women working for those organizations back into the field. Are any meetings set up with Taliban leaders?
I'm trying to get a bit of a readout of what the schedule is on the ground, but obviously they will be engaging with the de facto authorities with the same message that we've been delivering since the beginning on the need to roll back the policies that were put in place, and to underscore the message that humanitarian aid cannot be delivered without women, right? And it's just not it's not ethical to do it without it, and it is not operationally feasible to do it without women's active participation.
And I had just one other question.
Uh-huh.
There was a serious attack in Mogadishu yesterday by al-Shabaab with quite a number of killings and injuries. Does the Secretary General have any comment on that attack, which was on a regional administration office, I
I mean,
believe?
we condemn yet another attack by insurgents in Somalia, targeting governmental infrastructures, which is just has the effect of further hampering the ability of the government to deliver services to the people who need it. Madame.
Thank you, Steph. This is a question regarding humanitarian aid in North Korea. There was a recent report that OCHA found that only something like $2.3 million in aid was given to North Korea this year, and only by 3 countries, Switzerland, Sweden, and Norway, I believe. Last year, at least 14 million was given. So clearly this is a tremendous reduction and no doubt related to the proliferation activities. But given that, it's such a low portion, does the UN, I believe the UN has served for, its own humanitarian aid or money to buy it. And I was wondering, in cases like this, if the UN then uses its own.
Well, we do have a SURF, we have a Central Emergency Response Fund that we use to kind of kickstart humanitarian aid because it's easily and quickly dispersible. I think the report you referred to on North Korea is a bit dated. It is clear that our ability to assist people in the DPRK on humanitarian level is limited for a big number of reasons, but we keep trying to do what we can.
Just to follow up, the report.
Hold on, the microphone. Yep.
The report said that it had to do with, it was last year,
Yeah.
for 2022.
All right, I'll check. You are likely right. Ms. Salome, and then we'll go to Tissam.
Just following up on Afghanistan, is there any kind of calculation of how much aid is getting in versus is not getting in, since a few organizations have resumed some operation? What are they doing now compared to, or what is the UN doing now compared to what it was doing before, or maybe something just to put in
in terms
perspective
of
the impact?
what's
In
the
terms of
before?
delivering aid.
No, but what is your time post in terms of before? Like before the
Yeah, good point.
yeah.
I guess, in term, since they've announced the ban on
Right.
NGO
Okay. No.
workers.
Then okay. It's obviously as these policies come into place, it's obviously more challenging for us to deliver aid. What is the case though is that the situation in different provinces. The situation in each province differs, or let me put it in in a better syntax. Each province has different situations, right? So I'll try to get you some numbers and see if we can clarify your question and my answer. Ibtisam.
Thank you, Steph. I have 2 questions. First, on Ukraine and Russia. So the Russian foreign minister was quoted, according to media reports, he said that the war between Russia and the West is no longer a hybrid, but it's almost a real one. in reference to Ukraine's allies of sending weapons. Do you see this as an escalation in rhetoric? Do you have any comments on that?
Well, listen, there's been a lot of rhetoric from all parties involved in this conflict since the beginning. It's not our position, our job to give color commentary on that rhetoric. I think our actions speak clearly. The humanitarian action, our action around the Black Sea grain initiatives, our action on trying to get Russian fertilizer and food out to market, all with the singular aim of dealing with the global food crisis and helping those in Ukraine who need humanitarian assistance. I will let you and analysts judge what statements are escalatory or not.
Okay, my second question is on Palestine. So Palestinians protested today against threats made by Minister of National Security Itamar Ben-Gvir regarding the imminently carry out forced displacement of Palestinians in Khan al-Ahmar. Do you have any comments? Did any UN officials visited the village recently?
I'll double check. I think there have been some visits in the past. Obviously, we've expressed our concern about this particular situation. We'll continue to monitor it very carefully. Yvonne and then Gregory.
Thanks, Stefan. So first question, please, on Afghanistan. Will we have to wait until Martin Griffiths gets back before we get a press briefing? I ask that because the last delegation who went briefed press on the ground, but not us.
No, Ms. Mohammed will be back on Wednesday morning in the building. We are working with her office to schedule something on Wednesday. Okay,
thank you. Second question on the Undersecretary General of Peace Operations trip to Lebanon. Mm-hmm. Does that form part of the investigation into the death of Irish peacekeeper Sean Rooney? No. Is he going to be briefed on that by the Lebanese authorities?
I know he will be. Let me put it this way. The trip is part of the commemoration of the 75th anniversary of peacekeeping. It is not. It has not been driven by the murder of our UN peacekeeper. I have no doubt that Mr. Lacroix will be briefed on this by our colleagues when he meets them on the ground.
Sorry, by the Lebanese authorities as well?
I can't speak for what the Lebanese authorities will tell him. I'm with certainty. I can. Almost 100% certainty, I can tell you that our colleagues, the UN colleagues, will brief him, no doubt, on the situation, but I can't speak for the Lebanese authorities. Gregory.
Thank you, Stefan. Russian Foreign Ministry has criticized the latest statement of the UN on implementing grain initiative. Russian Foreign Minister also said today that none of UN efforts ensured the export of Russian food and fertilizers, and there are Russian fertilizers blocked in European ports, which aim to deliver to African countries for free. So, do you have any to comment? And so, has the UN had the contacts in recent days regarding this issue?
Sure. I mean, a couple of points to make. First of all, I think the press statement that was issued was part of our regular communication. We have been extremely transparent on the work that we're doing around the Black Sea Grain Initiative and the other efforts. It was a summary of the data, but the data itself of how many ships, what's on the ships, where these ships are going, is on the website for all to see. And I think, as I mentioned to Ibtisam, our efforts to get Ukrainian grain, Russian grain and fertilizer out to market, including ammonia, is pursued with one goal in mind, and that is dealing with the global food crisis, trying to mitigate the impact of the war in Ukraine on the most vulnerable throughout the world, and we've seen the positive impact it's had on the price of food at the global level. Also worth remembering that the UN is not party to commercial contracts, right? So when grain is bought and sold and exported through the Black Sea Grain Initiative, we have no way of dictating where those contracts, where they go. It is contracts between commercial parties. We do know that the overall impact of getting all that grain back on the market has had a positive influence on lowering the price at the global level. On the issue, on the more specific issue of the Russian grain and especially the Russian fertilizer, two things I want to point out. One is that the WFP ship that we had mentioned that had shipped Russian fertilizer from a northern European port to Malawi is in the port of Beira in Mozambique. It is unloading. It's going to take about a week to unload and bag the fertilizer, and then it will be shipped overland to Malawi to those to people who small farmers, people who need it quite a bit. Also on our efforts to get Russian grain and fertilizer back on, we are not the decision makers. We are the advocates for this. So the Secretary General, Rebecca Greenspan, and others have been in constant contact with all of the parties involved. We've talked about, obviously, talking to the Russians, talking to the Ukrainians when it comes to the ammonia pipeline. We have been in touch with the European Union, with the U.S., with the private sector. The Secretary General was in Davos a few days ago. He had a number of meetings with private sector actors who could have a positive role to play in this. Rebecca Greenspan and her team will be going to Moscow later this week as part of her regular contacts with Russian authorities on this. I think it's been about almost monthly, either in-person visits in Moscow or in Geneva or by video conference, and this will be to focus on our efforts, our advocacy on the facilitation of unimpeded exports of Russian grain and fertilizer, including ammonia, which is a reminder, not sanctioned, to get those things back on the global market for the benefit of many. Ephraim.
Thank you, Steph. Two quick questions. On the visit of Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo to Baghdad, could we get a little more context? What prompted that visit? Is there any specific reason behind it, or is it just a routine?
It's a good. I don't know if there's a specific invitation, but I'll find out for you.
Okay. And on Rwanda and the death of the investigative journalist John Williams Ntwali, the official account says that he died in a road accident. Does the UN subscribe to that account, or given the number of people who have died in vague accidents in that country, human rights defenders?
Well, I mean, I think whenever we see a journalist die, it is important that there be a full investigation. It is not for us to say, to subscribe to one theory or another. I know there have been questions raised and concerns raised. We have seen throughout the world journalists die sometimes in not mysterious circumstances, others in mysterious circumstances. So it is important that there be a full accounting of what happened.
So you're calling for an investigation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there will be an investigation. It is important that there be full accounting so everyone knows the facts. Stefano and then Alan, and then we'll go back to, and then we'll go to Iftikhar, and then we'll go to round two.
Thank you, Stefan. About Libya, last weekend there was a meeting of Arab League, and only few countries show up. So my question is, what level of confidence the Secretary General still has on the government of Tripoli to represent Libya in this moment?
It's not, it's not for us to say we have a level of confidence and no level of confidence. What is important is that for all Libyan political actors to work towards one goal, and that is the unity and the stability of their country. So this is something we keep pushing. This is something we keep advocating for, but it's not for me to do a thumbs up or thumbs down on the confidence we may have or not have in a government. That's not our job. Alan, and then we'll go to the screen.
Thank you so much, Stefan. Russian Foreign Intelligence Service Director Sergei Naryshkin today said that there's a quote, "There's a reliable evidence that Ukrainian army is stockpiling weapons and ammunition provided by the West on the territories of nuclear power plants." My question is, do you have any information regarding the situation on Ukrainian nuclear power plants in this regard?
I do not. I would encourage you to reach out to our colleagues at the International Atomic Energy Agency. Iftikhar, Pam, and then Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Steph. Questions on Afghanistan have been asked, but please clarify for me whether Mr. Griffith's delegation is already in Kabul.
Yes, they are in Kabul.
All right. Thank you very much.
Most welcome. Pam, and then Abdelhamid.
Thanks, Steph. My question is about UN Security Council reform. Needless to say, it's also not the mandate of this SG, but U.S. Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield mentioned that that was one of the reasons she's headed to Africa, and in particular Mozambique. Does the Secretary General have anything to say, encouraging or anything else about Security Council reform to bring it up to date? Thank you.
Well, I think you answered part of the question when you said it's not within the remit of the Secretary General, but I will throw in a few words. The Secretary General his last two predecessors have been very clear that the current makeup of the Security Council is not a reflection of the world we live in today and now in 2023. It reflects the world in 1945, and I think there would be reform of the council would assist in the credibility and legitimacy of the UN as a global institution. But obviously that is firmly in the hands of member states who've all spoken about Security Council resolution, but obviously the devil is in what exactly that would look like.
Thank you.
Mr. Abdelhamid Al-Sayam. You've been patient, but you're muted. Still muted. No. All right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can. Go ahead.
Amsus Baludan is a Swedish politician. 2 days ago, there was a demonstration in front of the Turkish embassy in Stockholm. He burned a copy of the Quran in front of the Turkish embassy. Does the Secretary General believe this is a freedom of expression or Islamophobia and hate speech?
I think the Secretary General fully supports the statement made by Mr. Moratinos, of the head of the Alliance of Civilization, who firmly condemned this act, this burning of the Holy Quran, which is yet another symbol of the growing hate that we've been seeing against many religions, whether it's Islam or Judaism and others. And such acts should be clearly condemned, and we do so. Edie.
A quick follow-up on Russian fertilizer.
Mm-hmm.
As I recalled, there was a significant amount of fertilizer in several European ports that the Russian government was donating to developing countries. You talked about the one ship that we know about. What's happening with the rest of that that ammonia for fertilizer, and why haven't there been any more ships?
There have not been any more ships, which is too bad, because there is ammonia sitting in a number of European ports that could be moving. To say that this is a complex problem that we're trying to solve would be understatement. It's a bit like a Rubik's cube, but if you had twice as many colors and patterns that you were trying to arrange. It involves a number of players, whether it's in the European Union, multilateral banks, shipping companies, insurance companies, the parties involved, many other governments. The Secretary General, Ms. Greenspan, and others have been really trying hard to unlock these fertilizers. From my limited scientific knowledge of fertilizers, they do have a sell-by date. So it's also a matter of making sure that the fertilizers do not go to waste. The ship that went off to Malawi via Mozambique was inspected by WFP experts to make sure the fertilizer was still usable. So that's where we are. Ibtisam, then Linda.
Okay, I have two follow-ups. On the fertilizers, do you have, in which countries you still have fertilizers that not, Russian fertilizers that are not being shipped?
Number of ports. I'll see if I can get you those details.
And then follow-up on Libya. So from the SG perspective, who does represent Libya for him? When he will pick up the phone to call the Libyan government, who is he going to call?
I think we went through those hoops a while back, and I will not get myself in a knot explaining that again. I think the important thing is for the Secretary General, Mr. Batili, to be able to pick up the phone to the many power brokers in Libya. There is a government that we work with, but there are also many others that have an influence in Libya, inside and outside, and we are keeping in contact with them. Linda.
Thank you, Steph. Apropos of the fertilizer, as we know, the SG came up with the concept of a package deal in which Ukrainian grain would be shipped out and that fertilizer, ammonia, et cetera, would be shipped out by the Russians. My question is that clearly you said the Russian fertilizer arrangement is commercial, UN doesn't have a role.
Well, I mean, all of the everything is commercial, right? Because there's been some, the contracts to export the Ukrainian grain are between grain shippers and the Ukrainian government or their agents or commercial exporters of grain in Ukraine. So all of it is commercial. We're trying to, in a way, pave the road so all of this can be put back to export, which includes Ukrainian grain, Russian fertilizer, including ammonia.
Just to follow up on that, well, given the situation that there's really not much coming from the Russian end, is there any consideration that the SG perhaps would call some kind of meeting among the countries that are sort of holding back this situation, given, I think, as what was said, that there's a limited shelf life?
I mean, I think, these sorts of big international meetings are useful if they're going to lead to an immediate outcome. There are bottlenecks in different places, whether it's in private sector, whether it's in governments, or the European Union, national governments or the European Union. We're trying to remove those bottlenecks. So it's more about surgical diplomacy in trying to remove those bottlenecks than trying to bring everybody together.
Thank you.
Speaking of bring everybody together, Paulina, or surgical spokesmanry. Yeah. Thank you. That's trademarked, by the way. But no, it's okay.
I am not a doctor, just to confirm. All right, good afternoon, everyone. President of the General Assembly, Cheba Koroshi, will today meet with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Dominican Republic, Mr. Roberto Alvarez. They will be joined by Ambassador Jose Blanco, the permanent representative of the Dominican Republic here at headquarters. The meeting will be to discuss matters relevant to the UN agenda, in particular, the UN Water Conference in March. Earlier today, President Koroshi met with Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield, the permanent representative of the United States. And then this afternoon, he will be speaking with Ambassador Satyendra Prasad, the permanent representative of Fiji. And sustainability is on the agenda for both of those bilaterals, as well as forthcoming events in the General Assembly. And then looking to tomorrow at 10 a.m. in ECOSOC is the special meeting on social and economic measures to prevent genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity. President Koroshi will have remarks at around 10 a.m. He will also speak that day to the UNESCO event for the International Day of Education, and while that event starts at around 10 a.m., his remarks will be between 11 a.m. and noon. That's everything I have for you. Do you have anything for me? Okay, let me check in the chat. All right. Well, I've brought everyone together in that no one has any questions. So thanks very much, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you for listening today. One of the things that here on policy and rights, and that as your host I want you to focus on is how we can spread a more loving world and share with people the ideas and the ideals of living without fear and living in peace. And one of the things that the United Nations is hopeful for in that respect is that they are actually helping people live better lives, because they are supplying medical, food, and the opportunities for conversations outside of, say, refugee camps, or outside of what could have been destruction or disruption of normal life. So, thank you for listening to us, and please do find that subscribe button and click on it. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.